join me for today's video where we take a look at that very traditional triangle. Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Sharon and today we're going to take a look at that very traditional symmetrical triangle. We're going to take a step back and take a look at that floral design that has really stood the test of time. It's quite often the first or second design you learn when you're starting off your floral journey, and we're going to take a step-by-step look today at how you can create that design for the home, for your workplace, or for your local place of worship. Now, if you follow Mrs. Hinch, she's a little bit of an online sensation regarding home cleaning. You might recognise this container that I've picked up in my local supermarket. So this one has come from Tesco's, but it's part of the Mrs. Hinch range, and it's a creamy sort of ivory colour. And my colour choice today is going to be some ivory, some peach and some blue, one of my favourite colour combinations. And I felt that this was a container that was going to work really well with today's style, but was going to make the arrangement more current and less traditional like we tend to think about this traditional triangle design. Now I'm going to be using a sort of peach and blue colour combination, and if you're new to floral design, we tend to use a colour wheel sometimes to inspire us for colour combinations. So laying opposite one another on the colour wheel are two complementary colours, and today I'm going to be working with the blue and the orange. And you might think, well, that's a colour combination that I wouldn't put together. Blue and orange reminds me of the 80s when we had those two very clashing colours together in our home decor. But I'm going to do it today with a really soft, muted shade of orange and a paler version of the blue, and we get a really beautiful colour combination that is currently quite fashionable in wedding work. So I've chosen a piece of floral foam that's going to fit in this container really well, and I'm using floral foam today, but this container would work really well with chicken wire instead of floral foam if you're looking for something that's more sustainable and better for the environment. And I'll probably use this container in another video to create a design without using the floral foam. Now, because it's a traditional design and we're going to need some side placements to give us the width in our arrangement, we need to leave the floral foam above the side of my container. When we're creating more modern designs, we tend to push that foam down lower so that we don't have an excess amount of foam to cover, which then makes that design very fussy and quite traditional. So traditional work like this, you need to have a good inch at the side of your container. That's nice and secure in there. It's not going to fall out or move around, so I'm not too concerned about placing tape over the top. But you might feel for extra security that you'd like to put some floral tape over the top. Now, traditional proportions for this type of arrangement is that the height of the design is twice the height or the width, depending on what the widest measurement is. So today, the longest measurement is my container. So I'm looking to go at least twice the height. Generally, you wouldn't go smaller, but it doesn't matter so much if you go a little bit taller. But I'm going to be working off those fairly traditional proportions. I'm going to start with a tall, straight, linear piece of material, and I'm going to use the Delphinium to give me my first placement. This is what we would refer to as a line material because it makes your eye travel up and down. And generally speaking, the line material is far better to give you the height in your arrangement. And then the more open flowers, what we would refer to as rounds, are better for the centre and for the focal area. I'm just going to go roughly twice the height of my container. That might be a little bit taller, but that will help make the design in proportion with my container and means that my flowers will be the most dominant feature rather than my container. Now I'm going to reinforce that line by bringing some more of the Delphinium towards the back. So at the moment, you're looking at the arrangement from the back, but if I turn it here from the side, what that second piece is doing is bringing your eye towards the back, and it's helping to create some depth in the arrangement, and it will prevent the overall design from becoming too flat. Now, in my eagerness to get my Delphiniums out of the container, I've just managed to snap two, But now what I'm going to do is bring one slightly alongside that first delphinium, but more towards the front, so that that blue colouring is being brought all the way down there to what will eventually be my focal point. So now we've gauged the height of the arrangement, we're going to move on to creating the sides. And at the moment, all I'm doing is giving myself an outline shape. And to create my widths, I'm going to use a flower that you maybe have not seen before. It's a flower called oxypetalum. Its common name is Tweedia, and it's a fairly new flower here in the UK. I'd say it's probably been with us for maybe 3 or 4 years. And what I'm looking to do here is to create my width, roughly half of the length on the top here. And that's going to give me a triangle where the height is larger than the width. If you think back to when you were in school, there are lots of different triangular shapes. This one is symmetrical, so the arrangement is equal on both sides. But we have looked at triangles on the channel before that are asymmetrical, and the balance is different on both sides. Now I'm going to leave the foliage on today because it's still quite cool. The weather isn't particularly hot at the moment. But when we're using the Tweedia later on in the year, I would encourage you to remove more of the foliage to help keep that flower alive. And if you've got sensitive skin, then the oxypetalum does exude this white sap from the bottom, very much like the euphorbia family. And it can be a bit of an irritant to those of you with sensitive skin. Now I've gone really quite traditional with this outline shape, and I've placed my material in fairly symmetrically on either side. I don't really want it to be perfect because if we think about nature, flowers aren't perfectly arranged. But if you imagine a line running from the side to the top, we've started to create that triangle shape. And there is more than one way of making this triangular design. And you will see that on the different tutorial videos I do, I might explain it in a different way, depending on the different flowers that I might have that particular week. So what I've done here is to help me create some depth in that arrangement. I've brought my flower out towards the front. And again, if we take that imaginary line from top to bottom, we're starting to create a profile and a design that isn't flat and all squashed up towards the middle. So that's my very, very basic outline shape. Hopefully you can see that it's starting to form a triangle, and then what I'm going to continue to do is to fill in the center point, add in some foliage and build up around that outline structure. Now first of all, I'm going to find myself a fairly straight piece of greenery, and this one is pistache. It's that greenery that florists use a lot as their sort of staple go-to piece of greenery. This is going to help reinforce that background and to establish the height. And then I'm going to continue bringing some shorter, smaller pieces towards the front. And I'm really just at the moment building up on the outline shape. I'm aiming for a fairly traditional design. If you think about a centre line, I'm trying to achieve an arrangement that looks similar on both sides, but isn't perfectly matching. The pistache foliage here is a really soft, wispy foliage. And in just a second, we'll introduce some of the leather leaf as well, which is going to give me a different texture and a different colour and a completely different shape. But hopefully that greenery there will visually give a bit of depth because it's a darker colour. Gives me a lovely contrast in textures and really helps to pull that design together. Now, lots of these words that I'm talking about are the principles and elements of design. And if you're new to flower arranging or you're training to be a florist, if you want a little bit of help and some digital downloads, pop over to my Etsy store. I'll link it in the description box at the end, and you'll be able to find some guidelines that will really help you understand everything that I'm talking about. Right, so my next greenery is the leather leaf, and you might hear lots of rustling, and that's because we store this in the plastic bag that it was delivered in, and the humidity is maintained inside that bag, and then it stops the leather leaf from drying out too quickly. And what I'm going to do here is cut myself some pieces roughly the same length as the width of my arrangement. I'm going to cut two that are fairly similar, and then I know that each side of my arrangement is going to be a similar length. It doesn't have to be perfect, but when you're a beginner and when you're learning, it's a really good tip sometimes to cut your material the same size before you start, and it helps to reinforce that outline. I'm going to use some slightly smaller pieces again on the sides towards the back, and they are really going to help cover my floral foam, which is really important, and it's also going to help bring that colour in all the way through to the top and to the sides. Now we're going to bring another bit up towards the back, slightly out to the side, so that I'm increasing the overall shape of that triangle, and then I'm going to repeat that on the opposite side, but without making it perfectly matching. And now a bit of stronger greenery towards the back, and I think I'm done with greenery for a moment. Now, if you don't have the same type of greenery as me, just experiment with whatever you can get hold of. You might have to buy it from your local florist shop. If you're lucky enough to have friends and family that have greenery in the garden, then see what they have available for you to use. Or start adding some extra plants to your garden so that you have something that you can cut from when you're making your floral designs. Now, I will of course cover my floral foam towards the end, but I'm going to start adding some of the softer colour in. And it's not a perfect match with my container, but it's a really soft, very delicate shade of peach. What I'm looking to do now is to place this slightly lower than the original delphinium. It's going to be slightly offset next to that delphinium, and I'm going to bring what we call a focal line down through the front. Now, in traditional flower arranging, you don't tend to have this focal line. It tends to be something that florists do rather than hobby style flower arrangers. But what it does is it makes your eye travel down through the front of the arrangement so that you get rhythm and repetition in your arrangement. I have removed off a few of the outer petals of the roses. Sometimes when the rose is really pale like this, or it's white, you get more damage on the petals than you do when the rose is dark. And if you've been watching me for a while, you'll know that sometimes I'm reluctant to remove the outer petals because I really love all the different variations of the colours that we get. So I'm bringing your eye now down towards the focal area. We've got 4 roses so far. You can see that I'm bringing them out towards the front so we get depth and we have a profile starting to take place. We really want to avoid that very flat arrangement and this flower being placed too close to the centre, because your arrangement almost curves in as you get to the bottom. Now I'm going to place one extra rose a little lower, tucked down a bit closer to my floral foam, because that's going to help give me a focal point and a more dominant section in the arrangement. And I've only got 5 roses today, so I'm just going to keep those to the focal section, but you can evenly distribute more roses if you have them on either side of that focal line. But what I do have is a beautiful spray carnation. Just get that out of the way. Beautiful bi-coloured spray carnation. There's a little bit of a darker reddish sort of peach tone in there as well. And rather than putting the whole head in as it is there, because it's visually quite strong, I'm going to cut off some of the side shoots to make a smaller sized head, which will work much better towards the outside. A little bit shorter with that one. And what we don't want to do is add really big flowers to the outside. The larger, more dominant flowers are always in towards the centre. So I'm going to do the same on the opposite side, just thin off one of my flower heads so I have a better shape to work with. And I can add this in on the opposite side. And they don't have to visually be identical. Please remember that you don't have to make this design perfectly mirrored on both sides. Remember that the flowers don't grow in that matching pairs. They don't look exactly the same. You're just trying to evenly distribute that colour from one side to the other. Okay, so if we look at the arrangement now, you'll see that the spray roses are only in this section here, and it almost cuts that design in half. So I need to bring some of the same colour of that rose higher up in the arrangement so that the colour is brought all the way up and it becomes an overall arrangement rather than two separate parts with a top and a bottom. So I'm going to thin that out a little bit more, just decide which flowers I'm going to remove, and then I can place this in on the whole stem, that full length stem, and that is going to bring that colour almost to the top of my arrangement. And then with the shorter pieces that I cut off, I'm going to tuck them in quite low, close to the foam. This is called recession, and it helps to give your arrangement depth and draw your eye right the way down into the centre. Now, if we think about that same theory and we consider where I've placed the blue flowers, they are basically on the outside of my arrangement. We don't have anything blue towards the centre. But to achieve that and to get that blue colour into the centre, I'm going to bring in some of the lovely eryngium. I'm not thinking about putting it in as a whole head because that's going to be really overpowering and too dominant there in the centre. So I'm going to take off individual heads and work them into the arrangement, and we get a much better effect. So we can start with some towards the outside and then start working our way into the middle to bring in that lovely colour blue towards the centre as well. So out of that one stem, I've now got 4 placements, and I don't get that very big, heavy concentration of the same texture and colour. And that's really all to do with proportions of flowers. It's all to do with evenly spreading out your colours. If your design was much bigger and we were maybe creating a pedestal or something for a much bigger venue, then placing the flowers in on the whole stem would be far more beneficial because you need that impact in a much bigger room. So this one is going to work towards the top, and it's going to bring the blue eryngium all the way up and that colour all the way up to the top. And then with the smaller pieces again that I've had left, and I'm just going to tuck them in down low, helps cover the foam, creates recession. So if we look now at the arrangement side on, you'll see that I have a profile at the front, but I've also extended my greenery to the back so that we have profile and shape here at the back. It doesn't look like it's been shoved up against a wall and we've got that flat 90-degree angle. Now, every now and again, I take a little step back when I'm doing a tutorial just to get a better perspective of the arrangement. And I feel that I need some more of the blue oxypetalum a little bit closer to the base. And thankfully, I've got 2 left. So these are now going to bring that softer blue colour more in towards the centre. And I'm just going to finish this one off now with some of the paler Hypericum berry. This is a really soft colour and it goes so well with my colour combination that I've got so far. And when I'm designing and when I'm thinking about how an arrangement is going to come together, I'm thinking about choosing flowers that have points. So that would be the delphinium and the oxypetalum. I'm also thinking of something that has a round shape, so that would be my roses. And I'm thinking of having something that would be a transitional material. So in this case, that would be my spray roses. And if you think about adding something from each of those groups, so rounds, transitional material, and spikes or lines, then hopefully you will achieve a really pleasing design, and the overall harmony of the arrangement will work really well together. So a couple more, or the last of my Hypericum berry there towards the front. And I'm just thinking that my rose here at the front, the stem on my rose is quite visible. So I'm just going to look for something to pop in this area there. And I think what I'm going to do is to use one more delphinium, because I have a couple here. And this one is a fairly small head, and I think it's going to tuck in really nicely just in that position there. And now I'm really happy with that finished piece. So that delphinium has snuggled up quite nicely alongside my rose. And hopefully now if we look at the design, we've got a really clear traditional outline shape in a raised container. So as always, thank you very much for watching. So don't forget, if you have any questions, please add them in the comment box below. I do love to hear your thoughts on the arrangement. I like to know where you're watching from and if there's any particular designs that you would like to see. Don't forget, pop over to the website if you want to join me for one of the online courses. Pop over to Etsy if you want to have a written instruction guide to go with this design that I've created today. Have a look at the other educational resources that are there, and I look forward to seeing you for the next tutorial. So goodbye for now.